Okay, so it's 4 o'clock, so we'll go ahead and get started here. This is going to be a little bit out of order and just kind of strange probably for the first go-around because we don't have a chairperson or a vice chairperson in board. And what we're going to do today is just kind of go through an orientation that we would give any of our new board members. So a lot of this is going to be just kind of the basics and kind of probably pretty boring. I'll try not to put you to sleep. I promise I won't read every slide to you, but there are some things that I just feel like I probably do need to read word for word. So just bear with me as we go through that. So the first thing that we typically do at any city board is we do a confirmation that the Kansas Open Meetings regulations and notifications were met. And so what that means is that we sent the notification out to the list of any person that requested to receive that list. And that did happen. So I will say we checked the box on that part of it. And then we will do a call to order and a roll call. And I'm just going to lead this one, if that's okay with you. I mean, this is your board, but since we don't have a chairperson elected or anything yet, I'll just kind of run the gamut for this first one. So I'll go ahead and call the roll. Todd Hadnot.
Present.
David Hodges.
Present.
Deborah Shelter.
Present.
Shetler? Sorry.
Yes, present.
Rakita Davis. Teresa Hernandez.
Present.
Aaron Melby.
Present.
Julius Griffin.
Present.
Josh Massey.
Present.
And Chris Grinter.
Present.
Okay. And you're Rakita. You can sit right there. Okay, typically at this point in the meeting, we would approve minutes. We don't have any minutes because we haven't had a meeting yet, so that won't happen. At every meeting, we will have just a time that's set aside for a citizens forum. We'll allow anybody from the public that wants to come to the podium and say whatever they want to say. They can do that. Doesn't look like we have anybody from the public here today. I guess nobody wanted to go through my board orientation. I don't know. So after the Citizens Forum, what we anticipate is we'll have some sort of a staff report or a staff update that will come from the police department. We haven't necessarily hashed out exactly everything that's going to be in that. That's going to be a work in progress. Some of that will be things that the board maybe requests that they would like to know. But we will, for the future meetings, we'll have some kind of a report about what's going on in the police department that will happen at this time. So new business. I guess we'll just jump right into the fun stuff. We're going to get into the new board orientation. Just one housekeeping thing. If you are going to speak, if you could speak into the mic, this is being broadcast on Salina Media Connection. If you don't speak into the mic, nobody will be able to hear you. So please speak into the mic. As I go through this presentation, if you have a question, if there's, don't feel free to step in, ask a question, anything that you have. I would prefer for this to be more of a conversational thing if we can do that, but I understand it is going to probably be kind of monotonous, and it's something that we just have to get through. A lot of good information, but it is hard to make it too interesting, I'm afraid. So even with all my hilarious dad jokes. So I'm just going to jump right in. First thing I guess I need to do is introduce myself. Sorry about that. I am Jacob Wood. I'm the Deputy City Manager. I've been a Deputy City Manager for about 2 years now. And as part of this board, the ordinance that created this board allows the city manager to assign a liaison to the board, and so he's assigned that position to me. So I will be at all of your board meetings. I will kind of serve as a point of contact. If you guys have any questions, concerns, issues, anything like that, you shoot me an email, give me a call, whatever. We'll make time to deal with whatever issue arises. We'll go ahead and Brad, if you want to introduce yourself, and we'll kind of go around this side of the room.
Okay. My name is Brad Nelson. I'm your chief of police here. I've been here a little over 7 years. I definitely appreciate each of you being here and donating your time. It's something that we had something similar where I came from. We had something here, but it wasn't quite as formal, but I'm glad to see we're at this point today, and I look forward to our future relationship. Thank you.
Hello, I'm James Feldman. I'm a lieutenant with the Salina Police Department, currently assigned to Internal Affairs, and I also do recruiting and hiring.
I'm Ardina Havencourt, and I've been with the department for 25 years, and I'm going to take the next.
All right, with that, well, I guess, do you guys want to introduce yourselves? And we can do that as well. I mean, we are going to be working together for a while, so let's just do that too.
Sure. I'm Father David Hodges, and I serve as the Dean of Christ Episcopal Cathedral here in Salina.
I'm Teresa Hernandez. I am a licensed clinical social worker, and I am very involved in the Hispanic community in town.
I'm Deb Shetler, and I've been in Salina for a little over 26 years, and I have a lot of different jobs that I've worked, but I'm passionate about volunteering and do a lot of volunteering in social justice, criminal justice, avenues like that. So I'm really happy to be here.
I'm Josh Massey, and I teach social studies for Salina School District USD 305, and I have lived and worked in the Salina area for about 20 years now, and one of my students said, hey, you should serve on this board because you should put your money where your mouth is, you know? So I did. I'm Todd Hadnot. I'm a director at the St. Francis Ministries. I've lived in Salina well over 30 years.
Julius Griffin. I've been here for a couple years, military. I serve as a training non-commissioned officer, suicide liaison, and equals opportunities rep.
My name is Raquita Davis. I'm a licensed outpatient counselor at CKF Addiction Treatment. I've sat on drug court at a previous employer, and so actually one of my coworkers recommended that I would be maybe a benefit with my criminal justice and substance abuse and domestic violence experience.
Hi, I'm Chris Grinter. I've lived in Salina for 2 years, but I have actually worked in Salina for about 5 at Kansas State University Polytechnic campus in the admissions office. I see a lot of different students there and like to interact with them. I think that is kind of part of the reason why I wanted to join this is to be a representative for everybody that's going to be coming to our campus. But also I'm the Human Relations Commission liaison as well for the city. So happy to serve.
Aaron Melby. I've been with the police department for 4 years now, and I look forward to getting to know you all and to make our community a better place together.
All right, with that, we're going to dive right into the orientation part, so buckle up. Let's start here and just talk a little bit about our organizational structure. You see at the top, we obviously have the citizens, and then we have the city commission there. We have 5 commissioners. Those commissioners are elected at large. The mayor is just one of the commissioners, so that's a rotational basis. Every year we have a new mayor that's just one of the commissioners, so that's not an elected position at large. The city commission hires 1 employee. They hire the city manager, and the city manager is in charge of all personnel that work for the city. So I'm next guy under the city manager, and then we have a bunch of departments. This is a full-service city, so we do just about everything. We have human resources, public works, utilities, finance, fire, police, computer technology, development services, arts and humanities, and then we also have the Parks and Rec department. So everything that you see that happens in the city is all in that structure there. And you should have a copy of this, I believe. I know it's probably hard to see there, but this will be broadcast on the cable channel, so hopefully folks will be able to see that there. So we'll talk about the types of boards and commissions, and you can see here kind of the same structure. We have citizens, city commissions, and then the boards that are appointed, and we have a bunch of different boards, and they kind of break down into 4 or 5 categories. Those are quasi-governmental boards, quasi-judicial boards, regulatory boards, advisory boards, and then semi-administrative boards, which those advisory boards, some of them also have other functions there. This board, as you can see, it's kind of off to the side there. It is an advisory board, so the decisions that you make are advisory to the city manager, to the city commission, and to the police department. I'm not going to go over these in great detail and what they do, because I don't know that it really pertains to you specifically. This isn't a quasi-governmental board. Those are things like the airport authority and the library. They have their own boards. They really do their own thing, but they're appointed by the city commission. A quasi-judicial board is a board that gets to make, they kind of make their own judicial findings. So that's something like the Board of Zoning Appeals. Somebody appeals a zoning order, and that board gets to make the final decision on those things. Most of our boards are advisory boards, and basically what they do is they have the ability to advise the city commission and city staff, and that's exactly what this board is. So one of the things that was adopted by the City Commission in 2017 was a citizen board policy. And so this is a policy that applies to all boards across the city, all of the citizens advisory boards. And basically what this does is kind of sets out the rules and the roles and responsibilities of what those boards do, and kind of how they fit into the city's organizational structure. I'm not going to read that to you either, but that is comes straight from the from that resolution. It outlines the appointment procedures, and some of those appointment procedures are actually outlined in whatever document created the board. So in our for this board, the ordinance that created the board actually outlines how the appointments go. And so there are some boards that have their own documents that kind of outline some of these things, but this is just the general overall policy for boards. So the guidelines for operation, it says it has a participation is one of those things. Members are expected to attend on a regular basis. You're supposed to be provided an orientation, so that's what this is today. Compensation, unfortunately, there is no pay for this board, so this is free. I'm getting paid, so just so you know that. We are to submit some sort of an annual report. That's to be submitted in February of each year, and that's something that we'll have to talk about as that comes up, what we want to be in that. Rules of procedure, which is something that I am going to go through in great detail here in a little bit. That is adopted as part of this ordinance, adopts the rules of procedure for all of the boards. And then annual training, I am to provide, or city staff is to provide annual ethics training for each of those boards as well, and we're going to do that today. That'll probably be the most fun part of all of this. And I did put this little paragraph in here, and I'm going to read it to you. So relationships of citizen boards and city commission and staff. So the staff responsibilities, citizen boards are not given authority by the governing body to direct the work of city staff. City staff is provided to a board or commission as a resource for necessary information. However, staff will always endeavor to work closely with boards to enable them to carry out as efficiently as possible their responsibilities to the city government. And the reason I'm reading that, so what that says is, as a board, you can't tell the police chief that he has to do X, Y, or Z. So you can't create additional work for us, that doesn't have anything to do with this board. But the caveat to that is, if you guys have something that comes up, if you want us to do a policy review, or if you want us to, look into additional information or try to pull up statistics, we are certainly willing to do that. That's something that we can work together on, and we'll come up with a happy medium of how we provide that information to you. So we don't want a board that's telling individual staff members, you need to start having police officers at the Casey's on 9th Street from this time to this time. But if you have, you want statistics or you want some kind of information, we're certainly happy to provide that. So does that all make sense? And if I'm losing anybody, or if I know this is going to get, it's going to get a lot worse before it gets better, I'm afraid. So. So another thing that's in that board policy is youth liaisons, and we don't have those at this point, but that's something that in the future we may talk about. That policy allows for each board to have up to 2 youth members as a part of the board. We can certainly have conversations about that in the future if the board is interested in trying to find some youth liaisons. And then the last point, I think, on this section is procedural guidelines. So each board also has the ability to adopt their own guidelines. So if there's something that is not part of the city commission's resolution, or if there's something additional that you guys would like to do, we can certainly adopt some of our own rules and procedures. And those would be things like, when are we going to meet? Where are we going to meet? How are we going to manage those things? So that's really up to the board to talk through some of those things, and we will later on in the meeting. Okay. Meeting rules and procedures. So this was adopted as part of resolution number 126875. So that was adopted in 2012. And some of these I am going to just have to kind of read to you, because this is kind of the meat of how the board will operate. So this is the day-to-day operations of how a board goes through the meeting process. So the first item there is regular meetings and quorum. It basically just says that we're to hold some sort of regular meetings, and we will do that. We'll establish some sort of a schedule at some point. Special meetings of this board can be called by the presiding officer with the consent of 2 members of the board. So if there was an instance where we needed to call a special meeting, whoever the board chair is would have to get 2 other board members to sign off, and we would have a special meeting. And board meetings shall be conducted in a courteous and expeditious and business-like atmosphere. So, we are, while we can be as casual as you want to be, this is a professional environment. So, language, that sort of thing, we want to make sure that we're treating this as we would a business-like atmosphere. Rule number 2, agenda. So for each meeting, we will have an agenda. I've set one out for you. This is kind of just the baseline agenda. If there was if there's something that the board at some point feels like they want to add, a specific kind of report, we could add that as part of the agenda as well. I mean, this is not a hard and fast, but we do have to have an agenda. Rule number 3, so basically what this says is that we won't act on an item on the agenda. So, and you'll see this happen a lot if you watch city commission meetings. You have somebody, we will not make any decisions on whatever that item is that night. Now, the commission may decide they want to put it on at a later date, but we won't discuss that today. So if we have a citizen or somebody comes forward and they say, we think you need to address X, that's great. We can certainly take that up, but we haven't had time to take a look at it. The board hasn't had time to review it. So we don't want to be making decisions on the spot without having any of that background information or data gathered. So, so we won't be acting on anything that's not on the agenda that day. Rule number 4 is about public participation, and as I mentioned earlier, we will allow, the board has the opportunity to allow citizens to participate in our discussions and be part of the meeting. The only thing here is that the public has to participate in the terms that the chair sets. So we would be calling on the chairperson, or the chairperson would be calling on the citizens to provide input at whatever point of the meeting they wanted to. I didn't move forward with my slides. Okay, public hearings. I'm not going to go over that. We won't have any public hearings for this board. Minutes of the meeting. We will keep minutes of the meetings, and those will be approved at the following meeting. So in the part of the packet that goes out for the next meeting, you will see the minutes. Everything will be broken down. You'll have an opportunity to review those, and at the next meeting, you can approve them. And if there's any changes or something that you don't feel was recorded appropriately, that would be the time for you to say, hey, it's not what I said, or that's not how I said it. Could you please correct the record? And then those minutes will be kept on file. The city clerk has a records management policy, so they will keep those on file. Rule number 7 is the presiding officer, and I'm going to read a couple of these because I think this is a pretty important part of this, the roles and responsibility of a presiding officer, and at some point we will appoint somebody to do that, so you'll have to take on, somebody up here is going to have to take on that role. So the board shall elect a chair and a vice chair at the first regular meeting after the mayor has appointed members to the board during the annual fall or spring appointments. In the absence of the chair shall be in the absence of the chair, the vice chair shall be the presiding officer. In the absence of the vice chair, the board shall select from one of the members a presiding officer for that meeting. So we will appoint a chair. Chair's not here, goes to the number 2. If they're not here, then the members will just appoint somebody to run the meeting that day. Duties of the presiding officer. The presiding officer shall be responsible for the conduct of all board meetings. The presiding officer shall have authority to recognize the board members and members of the public to speak and decide on all questions of parliamentary procedure and orders of business. All rulings of the presiding officer shall be considered valid unless overruled by a majority vote of the members present, as explained in Rule number 9. And that happens so rarely that I'm not even going to go over how that process works. I've actually I haven't seen it happen in a really long time. So typically that's just not something that you have to deal with. And just so you know, when we do appoint a chair, it's not like you're on your own. Certainly if there's any, you're uncomfortable with something, we are here to help make sure that this process works. So don't feel like it's a position that you wouldn't be able to handle. Anybody that decides they want to be the chair, we'll make sure that we get them up to speed on what they need to do. The rights of the presiding officer can make motions, second motions, or debate any questions, and have the full responsibilities and rights as a member of the board. So a lot of times you may have some boards, the chair may not get to vote, but that's not the case on our boards. The chair can make motions, the chair can second a motion, the chair can vote. So the chair has the same rights as any other member of the board. Okay, rule number 11 is debate, motion, and second required. Following any discussion necessary to formulate a motion on any item on the agenda requiring formal action, a motion shall be made by a member which shall specify the action to be taken. So all motions, with the exception of a motion to withdraw a motion, shall require a second prior to the debate. If a motion or second is not made, the matter shall die for a lack of a motion. So if we have an action item that comes up, we would need somebody on the board to make a motion. If there's no second, then that motion dies. If there is a second, then the commission can have a conversation about it, they can debate, and then at some point we'll call for a vote, and that motion will be voted on. Rule number 12 is motion and order during a debate. When any question is under debate, no motion shall be received, but the following, which shall have the precedence in order listed. I'm not going to go over all of those. That's part of parliamentary procedure, and I've got a little booklet for you all if you want to learn more about how Robert's Rules works. You can certainly do that, but it's really kind of rare that some of these things come up. Motion to adjourn, basically that just concludes the meeting, and we will ask for a motion to adjourn at the very end of the meeting. I'm not going to go over to lay on the table. I will talk about calling the previous question. So the previous question shall put in these words, call the questions. Its effect is to put an end to all debate and bring the board to immediate vote upon the motion. It must be seconded, may not be debated, and must be adopted by a 2/3 vote of the members present. So if you're in the middle of a heated debate, and I don't know if this is going to happen on this board, but if you're in the, somebody has made a motion and seconded that motion, and you're in the middle of a very long conversation back and forth, somebody can call the question, and if somebody seconds that, then that means the debate stops, and everybody has to vote on the motion that's on the table. So very rarely happens, but it is an option that's out there. Rule number 16, a motion to postpone to a certain date. That does happen from time to time. If there was a topic that we were discussing that you didn't feel like you had the right information, you wanted more information, you could postpone it and say, I want to talk about this the next meeting. Amendments to motions. So only the motion maker can make an amendment to the motion on his own, I guess. Okay, so if a motion maker makes an amendment to their own motion, then there's not a required vote. But if somebody wants to amend what has been moved, then that would require, it's kind of like just doing another motion. So you go down the line. So you guys are going to remember all of this, I promise you. I'm not going to go over these things here. It's just more parliamentary procedure items. And I'm not going to go over reconsideration of a question. That also very rarely happens. But you can see that it's there in your packet if you want to learn more about that. Number 22, voting order, roll call, and vote required, and silence. So sometimes during the process we may have a roll call vote. I'm not sure that's going to happen very often, but how that works is the board member or the board chair would say, I'd like the clerk to call the roll, and instead of just raising your hands or saying aye, we would go through each name individually and you would cast your vote on an individual basis. I don't foresee that that's going to happen on this board very often, but you never know. And then this is just kind of a list of the things that are more common motions that would be made, a motion to adjourn. And so you can just kind of see how those work. So that is the rules and procedures section. Does anybody have any questions, concerns, thoughts about that portion of this training? Well, then I'm just going to keep plugging away. I don't want to keep you here all night, but I know this is a lot of information. So the next section here is KOMA, which is the Kansas Open Meetings Act. And this is something that we have to pay pretty close attention to as a government entity. And these slides were taken from a presentation that was provided to us by one of the assistant attorney generals for the state of Kansas. So this is his presentation. I'm gonna go through it with you, and there are a lot of rules that we have to follow as a board that's open to the public. So this is pretty important, and there are some things that public boards kind of get hung up on, and we'll go over some of those things and try to clarify and make it. We want to make it so that you guys aren't put at risk of violating the Open Records or the Open Meetings Act. So these are some of the kind of top concerns. Executive sessions, sometimes people get into executive sessions with the wrong motion, or they call an executive session for the wrong reason. I'm going to go into detail about executive sessions a couple of slides later. This board will go into executive session. There are some boards that don't, but this board, for the purpose of hearing out some of the cases that we'll be looking at, we will be going into executive session. So that's something to think about. Serial communications is another thing we'll go over that sometimes get people hung up. And majority of membership of a public body gathering without any prior notice is a problem, and that would be a problem if the whole board went to an event and we didn't provide any notice, then that can be considered a public meeting. So we have to be watchful of those sorts of things. And then on our part, where the city has had issues in the past is not providing the proper notice that's required. So we work really hard to try to make sure that the notice goes out to people that have requested it. So the reason for this policy is basically that boards and commissions and public bodies conduct their business out in the open, and people from the public have access to it as much as possible. So who is subject to KOMA? We are. This board is subject to KOMA, and any board or legislative body is subject to these rules. So that's the same thing. State bodies, the state legislature, for local governments, cities, counties, townships, school districts, fire districts, anybody that really is in that public eye has to follow the Kansas Open Meetings Act. So what is a meeting? A meeting is any gathering or assembly in person through the use of telephone or any other medium of interactive communication. And lately, you've seen a lot of things happening on Zoom. So anytime, basically anytime that you guys are together, that is a board meeting. And that's the majority of the board. So, and that's different from a quorum. So it is the majority of board. So there's 9 of you. So if 5 of you are together somewhere, that can be considered a board meeting. And as I said, you could call in. If there were 4 of you here and 3 of you called, that would be a public meeting, or Zoom. Anytime where we're actually having interactive communication would be considered a meeting. And it really doesn't matter if we call it a board meeting. If you guys all showed up to a basketball game somewhere on a Friday night and sat together and talked about the business of this board, that would be a public meeting. So that's something that it's probably not going to be a big deal with this board, but it's certainly something that with the city commission we have to worry about. If they all go to the chamber banquet and there's only 5 of them, and somehow they end up sitting at the same table, that could be considered a public meeting, which means we would have had to send some sort of notice out, and if that doesn't happen, then that becomes an issue. So majority of a membership, so the next whole number greater than 1/2, and that is different from your quorum may be a little bit different than that depending on what type of board you're on. For discussion, you don't have to take any binding action. You don't have to vote on anything. As I said, it includes all gatherings. It doesn't matter where you're at. It could be a social gathering anywhere where you're discussing the business of the board. So I've talked about notice just a little bit. The KOMA has some very specific requirements about how you provide notice. It doesn't require them to be published in the newspaper or published on a website, but what it does require is that you provide notice to anybody who has requested notice. And that typically what we do when we ask people to sign up on our website, they can sign up and they'll get the email that says the board meeting is happening at this time. But it doesn't necessarily have to be. They could request, they could send me an email and say, hey, I would like you to call me or send me a postcard and let me know that you're going to have a meeting. And we really have to kind of follow those rules. So we don't have a lot of those, but we have had people that have asked for different kinds of notice in the past. So it's kind of interesting that there's no requirement for it to be in the paper or for it to be on a website or anything like that. It's really just a very individualized notice. So, and we try to work really hard to make sure that the people that have requested do get the notice. And basically what you have to do is provide the date, time, and location of where the public body is going to meet. And you have to do that within a reasonable amount of time. So it can't be that I send out notice 5 minutes before the meeting. It has to be done, beforehand. I think in your package you have some examples. I'm not going to go through those. If you're interested, you can certainly read those. Penalties. So the civil penalty is up to $500 for each violation that's paid, for each violation by each individual member of the public body who knowingly violates the act. I've never ever seen the Attorney General fine anybody. Typically what happens is they require additional training for that public board or body. And the city of Salina has been, what happens is a member of the public will call the Attorney General and say, hey, I didn't get the notice that I was supposed to get, or the meeting happened, and whatever the violation is. And then the Attorney General will do an investigation of that, and when they will come back with findings, and typically what they do is they say, hey, you guys need to provide additional training. So on the agenda here, you see this confirmation that the Kansas Open Meetings Act was followed. That is a direct result of a violation that the city had a couple of years ago. So that is on all of our board and committee and the city commission. They all asked that question at the beginning of the meeting to make sure the issue there is we don't want you as a board to have to be responsible for a violation of the open meeting, because it's not your fault if we didn't send out the violation, so, that we didn't send out the notice. So you ask us, did we send out the notice? And we'll tell you, yes, we did. And if it turns out that we didn't, it's really not on you, it's going to be on us. So that's a kind of a safeguard, because it's, it's not your fault that would happen, but it is the board members that they try to hold accountable if there is a violation. So that's something that's kind of interesting. Serial communications. This is something that gets people in trouble, and as I sent the first email out to the board, I asked you not to reply all to that email, and because if you had replied all, then that constitutes a serial communication. So that means that basically, if you reply all to an email and all the board members are on it, then we just had a board meeting and we didn't provide any notice and we didn't do any of those things. So it's perfectly okay to respond to me if I send you an email individually, but for board members to respond to each other, it's not appropriate. Meeting conduct. There's a lot of times people think that the KOMA requires things that it actually doesn't. So there's not an agenda that's required as part of KOMA. You really don't have to do anything above the meeting notification. So that's something that's commonly misconstrued. People think that you're required to provide an agenda. And typically we do. So when we do send our notice out, we will provide an agenda and a packet and all that information, but it's not necessarily a requirement. Meeting conduct continued, use of cameras, lights, recording, that's all allowed. Public can record a meeting. If somebody wanted to come in here and set up a camera and record the meeting, they're certainly able to do that. They could do it with a handheld recorder as well. As long as they're not disrupting the meeting, they're okay to do that. So they couldn't come up and sit right in front of you and put the camera in your face, but if they're off to the side, there's no issues with that. The public does not have the right to speak. So that's something that's also commonly misconstrued, I think. They don't have the right to speak. They only really have the right to listen. So we wouldn't have to provide citizens with the opportunity to speak, but we do. I mean, we do think that that's important, so that's something we do, but the Open Meetings Act doesn't require that. One of the things, you can't do a secret ballot, so we couldn't send a ballot around for you you have to do a voice vote or a hand vote, or you have to audibly vote. And minutes are actually not required as part of the Open Meetings Act. The only thing that you're required to record is a motion that would take you into executive session. I think we're going to talk about executive sessions here. So executive session, as I said, this board will go into executive session from time to time. There must be a formal motion that's seconded and carried, and that motion should be recorded in the minutes. We will provide you with all the language that you need for that motion and make sure it has all the elements that's required. It has to have a statement of the subjects to be discussed without revealing any of the confidential information, and then justification, so the state statute that outlines it, and then the time and place when the meeting will resume in open session. So typically what they say is, I'd like to make a motion that we go into executive session to talk about non-elected personnel for 15 minutes. The meeting will resume in this meeting space whenever that 15-minute time length has elapsed. Now, if you're in executive session and you hit 15 minutes and you need more time, the group has to come back out, go back into public meeting, pass a new motion with a new time limit, and go back into executive session. Who may attend? So only members of the public body. You can't just have mere observers come into that meeting. You can have staff, agents, or other non-public body individuals, but it says in here, according to KOMA, that those members don't have a right to attend an executive session, but I will tell you that our ordinance says that staff shall be part of that, and that was something that we had a lot of discussion about when we were creating this ordinance. So anytime you do have an executive session, it says that the staff liaison and a police department representative will be in that meeting. And you really wouldn't be able to, for this board, you really wouldn't be able to operate without it. I mean, the intent there will be, we'll go into executive session and we'll go through a whole case file and tell you what an investigation has found, and then you can deliberate about that. And we'll get into detail about how that process works here just in a little bit once we get to the more specific law enforcement community review board information. And I won't go into these justifications at this time. Ours are all going to be personnel matters of non-elected personnel, and basically that will be to protect the, whoever is the subject of investigation. We don't want to, put their name out all over the community while we're in the middle of the investigation. And I'm not going to go over these because I think we're good there. Okay, so that is the Kansas Open Meetings Act. Does anybody have any questions about that, how that all works? I told you this stuff was going to be fun. All right, I'm just going to move right into ethics because this is, I think, what everybody came here for today. And this is probably one of the sections where I'm going to have to just read stuff, which is not fun, but we have to get through it. So our ethics policy was adopted in 2017 as part of resolution number 177463, and this is an ethics policy that covers the entire city. So it covers city commission, it covers city staff, and it covers any board or commission that's part of the city. And basically, the governing body passed this because we're doing public service here, and people need to have confidence that we're doing the right thing. So, I mean, basically, the whole ethics policy is about doing the right thing at the right time, and not taking advantage of your position for any kind of personal gain. I can't think of how this board would be able to take advantage of this position for personal gain, but it's still something that needs to be in the back of your mind as we move forward. So as I said, this applies to all cities, all members of the city's governing body, any appointed member of the city, any appointed member of any other board and commission, and then all city employees. I'm going to read a little bit of this one here. So as actively involved participants in the Salina community, city officers and employees must be watchful for ethical considerations, including conflicts of interest that may arise in relation to the performance of their respective duties. This policy is intended to guide city officers and employees in the avoidance of unethical conduct and to preserve the ethical integrity of the decision-making process inherent in local government. This policy is not intended to modify the statutory or common law standards under the Kansas Conflict of Interest Law, and I won't read the rest of that, but basically, if there's any kind of conflict of interest, that's something that we need to be watchful for. And as you can see, I'm not going through every section of the ethics policy. You guys should have a copy of that. I sent that out to you. And it's pretty in-depth with the legal background. I'm not going to go through all of that stuff. I'm just going to try and kind of hit the highlights on this policy. So Section 4 is the general ethical principles, and I will read these because I think these are pretty important. It's not really that hard. It's kind of just common sense. You want to do the right thing, but I am going to go ahead and read through it because it is something that's important. So city officers and employees shall abide by the following general ethical principles. Place the public trust and interest of the city first and never intentionally act outside the scope of authority prescribed by one's official duties. Exercise fair, honest, and unbiased judgment in one's role as a decision maker and advisor. Do not knowingly misrepresent or withhold facts or information for the purpose of achieving a desired outcome. Do not seek, accept, or offer any gifts or favors of significant value which are either intended by the source or have the effect upon the recipient of influencing the objectivity of an advisor or decision making. So that's really the whole reason we're doing this, or we have an ethics policy, is to kind of, I got more. I'm going to read the next page too. Do not disclose or use misinformation received in the course of performing one's duties that is to be maintained in confidence by rule, regulation, or directive in the case of an employee, by the intent of the governing body in the case of a governing body or member, or by the intent of the applicable board in case of member of a board subject to any legal requirements of the Kansas Open Records Act, and treat all persons with courtesy and respect. And I think E there is kind of important to this board, because you are going to have some information about individual cases and officers as we go through things that is not going to be available to the public. As we go through these, I don't know what these cases are going to look like. We don't typically have a whole lot of complaints that we review, but, in this day and age, if there's a high-profile case or something that comes out, there may be information that this board is privy to that the public just can't know because it's part of the personnel file or whatever. So that's really important that we, if there's something that they're not supposed to know, something that we discuss in executive session, that it doesn't, go out into the public. So. Substantial interest, I'm not going to go too much into substantial interest or common law conflict of interest. Basically, this part of the ethics policy is if you have some kind of a dealing, and this board is, in particular, I think your dealings would be if you had a family member or something that was part of a case that we were discussing, that might be something that you might not want to take part in that. I can't think of another instance where this board would have that issue, but there are things at the city commission that happens all the time. So we have somebody that, one of our city commissioners works at a title company. Anytime we do a zoning or we do anything that has anything to do with work that he's done in his civilian job as a title agent, he can't make a decision on. So he has to say, I can't be part of that discussion. He recuses himself. He leaves the room. He doesn't participate in any of the discussions. So if there was something like that, and I can't think of what that would be other than maybe being, related or having some sort of a relationship with somebody that we were reviewing an investigation on, that would be something that we would want to know. Appearance of bias is another part of that, which is the next slide. So if you had any appearance that there was some sort of bias, that would be something that you might want to let somebody know about or abstain from taking action in a related matter. And this is how the city is to respond if there is an issue. So city's response to actions taken by a conflicted employee or upon a conflicted vote. And I didn't put all the sections here, but this is the specific section for an appointed board member. Upon discovery of an action taken by any of the city commissions, authorities, boards, or committees affected by a member's undisclosed substantial interest or a disqualifying substantial interest or a common law conflict of interest, the acting body shall, after consulting city staff and legal counsel, take the action it deems to best serve the public interest. The conflicted member who participated in the affected matter shall be disqualified from voting on the remedial action. And this has happened. Actually, not that long ago, we had a planning commission issue where the planning commissioner had a relationship with somebody that had an issue that came before the planning commission. Nobody realized it. They realized it after the fact. The board had to do a new vote on that, and that individual was not allowed to vote. And so the consequences of that violation, so violation by a board member may result in a private notice and warning, a private or public censure, or removal from office at the discretion of the governing body based upon the nature of the violation. So if there was a violation of this ethics policy and city staff would take a look at it and kind of try and determine what the appropriate level of discipline is, and that would actually be a decision made by the remainder of the board. And if it was something that was really bad, that would be elevated to the governing body, the city commission, and they would make a decision. And I'm not sure that they have, I don't think I've seen them do that since I've been here, but it happens. So again, for this board, I'm not really sure that there's too many circumstances where that would be much of an issue. And that is the end of ethics. So I feel like I flew through ethics. So we could start over and do it again. So that's really, that's kind of the board orientation that any board would get, kind of going through what the rules and procedures are, going through the ethics policy. You have a document there in front of you that I'd ask that you sign that just says you've received a copy of these ordinances, and that it doesn't say you received the training, and maybe I need to adjust that, but it does say that you've seen the ordinances, and if I could have that before you leave. I will roll into what would be more specific to this board, the Law Enforcement Citizens Review Board. So the Law Enforcement Citizens Review Board was created by ordinance number 20-11046. You should have received a copy of that in an email that I sent, and I believe if you don't have a copy in front of you now, I have some here as well. But this is the document that created the board. We're not going to go through every point of that today. We're going to kind of hit the highlights of the sections that I think are the most probably applicable. Some of these are things like how do you get appointed. I'm not sure that we need to go through that stuff. So I'm going to go through the board roles and responsibilities as outlined in that ordinance, and that's section 30-82. And I am going to read these to you because this is really the charge for this board. This is what you guys are here to do. This is the work that we're going to start doing as we move forward. So the first point there is to advise and assist the police department in policy development related to racial or other bias-based policing by police officers and the police department pursuant to the Kansas statute there and amendments thereto. You're to promote, advocate, and educate citizens about the existence and the purpose of the board. You're to assist the city manager, the chief of police, and the city commission in development of a racial or bias-based policing comprehensive plan. Point 4 is to provide recommendations resulting from board-initiated review of police department policies other than those policies addressing topics such as intelligence information, tactical plans, or resource deployment. So basically any kind of policy that we have that's not something that's covered by the Kansas Open Records Act, and I'm not going to go into detail about Kansas Open Records, but basically it's tactical stuff. So we don't want to talk in generalities about how we would kick down a door and arrest somebody. So.
If I could just add to that also, our policies that would be applicable for review if you wanted have all been on our SPD, the City of Salina police page since 2018. So all those policies have been on there and are on there. So if you take a look at those and if you want further explanation or if you whatever you want to do, but you can look at those online.
Yeah, and we'll provide links to those policies in an email so that, if there is something that, if you look through the policy and you see something you think that's, maybe we need to discuss that, we're certainly open and willing to do that and have that discussion as part of one of these meetings. So that would be something that you could say as part of other business. You could say, hey, I was looking through the policies and I saw this policy X, and I think we need to discuss that more. We could add that to the agenda at the next meeting. Or if that's something that you saw between meetings, you could certainly email me. And if you have questions about the policy that, you don't want to wait till the next meeting, I can certainly try and answer those questions or get them to Chief Nelson. But it is under your purview to review any of the policies. Basically anything that's not really public record. So anything that's on the website that's out there is available for your review and your comment, and we'll take a look at those things. And then the last thing is to review and advise the Chief of Police as to whether preliminary administrative determinations of the pre-disciplinary status of all complaints of excessive use of force or racial or other bias-based policing by police officers are supported by substantial competent evidence. And we'll kind of go into detail on number 5. I think number 5 is kind of the one that for these types of boards people seem to kind of gravitate towards, and those will be the cases that we've talked about in the review. And the Police Chief Nelson is going to go through kind of the process, the complaint process, and how we get those cases from a complaint and an investigation back to the board. So those are really the 5 charges of this board. And it's really kind of whatever the board wants it to be. So, if you have something that you feel like fits inside one of these points and you want to bring it up, we're certainly welcome to, you're welcome to do that. We'll look into those things. think number 2, that promote, advocate, and educate citizens. If you've got ideas about how you want to get this board out, there's lots of different models of how these boards work, and we did a lot of work of looking at other boards and just to see, what they do. And we spent some time in Wichita with some of their boards, or with their law enforcement review board, to see how they have done things. And they've only had a board for maybe 2 or 3 years now. But there's lots of different things that people do. Sometimes they will do, go and have a board meeting at one of our community centers instead of having it here at City Hall. We're here at City Hall because the camera's here and it's all set up and it's available, and we can get the broadcast out. But there's nothing that says that this board has to meet here. It's really up to the board. If you wanted to take the show on the road and we wanted to meet and kind of talk about things at other locations, or try and get out in communities, we can certainly do any of those types of things. So it's really kind of this is a blank slate. I mean, we can make this board, whatever you guys really want it to be. And I'm kind of excited about actually finally getting started. It's kind of been a long time coming, and that's partially my fault trying to get prepared for all of this. But I think we're here, and we're at a point where we can kind of start to move forward and maybe make some progress. Anybody have any questions about the roles and responsibilities of the board?
I wouldn't mind adding that this ordinance here, that when you get a chance to actually look at it, and maybe for the next meeting, if you have any questions, but I just wanted to say that there's an awful lot of work that went into making this, and we really did look at a lot of different agencies and try to pick what best fits our city, because there's no one template, because all cities are different, all communities have different issues, so you just can't reach out there and grab somebody's CRB and make it yours. It doesn't really work like that. But we looked at Topeka, Wichita, Riley County, Lawrence. I mean, we really looked at a lot of different places, but again, there's not one thing you just plug it in there. It doesn't really work like that. But if you have any questions about any of this, either now or later, by all means, that would be a good topic of a discussion as far as how we came to this, because it was months in its making to get to this point here, and actually to get us here together, it's probably a year in the making. So it's been quite a bit of work. Doesn't mean it's perfect, because it's not, but it's the best we came up with at the time. And definitely, if anything comes up, let us know.
Okay, so the next portion will be the kind of reviewing. I'm sorry.
Excuse me.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes. So here on point number 3, it says pursuant to Kansas State Article 22-4611A. And so is there a reference to this somewhere, or do we just need to Google it?
I can get you that.
So it says, assist the city manager, the chief of police, and the city commission in the development of a racial or other bias-based policing comprehensive plan, pursuant to that.
Yeah, so that state law, and Chief Nelson may know more about this, that state law, it has requirements for 3 or 4, maybe 5 elements that are part of a comprehensive plan. It's not a requirement by the state, as I'm aware, but it is something that's recommended that we do. And so we have, and maybe that's something we can talk about at one of our next board meetings. We can bring you what we have for a comprehensive plan. Basically, what we have, it's not like a big, it's really just kind of a compilation of documents and reports. But I think what we'd like to have is a more comprehensive plan. Something that's more than just just a compilation of reports, something that we could actually take a look at and grow with over time. So we can certainly maybe put that on the next agenda to go over that plan and what the state law requires, and then kind of get your feedback on what you think, how we want to move forward with continuing to develop that plan. And Chief Nelson, you may have.
Oh, that's a great question. It's something that, like a lot of laws that come out of Topeka, they make them, and then you've got to figure out what they want. So with that said, we do submit them annually, and there are 5 different areas that we have to reach, which we do, and we submit those as a comprehensive plan, but they don't approve the plan. I mean, I think you could submit 6 pages of whatever. They don't approve it. You just have to submit it, if that makes sense. But we do have a comprehensive plan. Certainly, I'm sure it could be better, but what I'm saying is, based on the guidelines we are provided, we we fit what they want, the requirements that they
the
ask for.
state's it's kind of vague. I mean, it's
It
kind
is
of a vague
vague.
requirement, but we'll certainly, that's a good note. We'll send you out the state law and what's required and what we actually currently have, and maybe we'll just put that as an item of discussion for the next agenda. And any questions, concerns, whatever that you guys have, we can kind of maybe start there.
And then one follow-up is, with that state law, so is that kind of the basis for these other Lawrence and Topeka and Fort Riley plans that they came up with, or are these two kind of separate things?
Well, they definitely, that's part of how they came up with the CRBs they came up with, if that makes sense. I mean, you will, the 5 areas that they say you will do it, and you have to submit that you are doing it and show them how you're doing it as far as your comprehensive plan. So, yes. It would make more sense once we show you that, and I think that would be a
actual
very good
document.
topic for the next meeting if you so desire, because it took a little while for me to wrap my mind around them wanting something, but then once you submit, they don't approve. They just acknowledge they received it. That's kind of how that works.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so the next item on the agenda is the compliance, or the complaint process. Complaint process. I forgot a T.
Lieutenant Feldman will be handling this portion, but I would say that these two that are in front of you, I made sure we brought these and put them all in front of you today. This does a pretty good job of explaining our complaint procedure, but what I gave it to you, provided to you for, was just to know that we have had this, and we've actually had this since 2008. So it's not something new that we're just starting all of a sudden, how do we take complaints? We've had a process for a long time, and these have been printed since 2008, just right here. And they were obviously printed in Spanish too for reasons. We have a fairly high Hispanic population is why.
Okay, we'll get started on this section. Like you know, I've already introduced myself. I'm Lieutenant James Feldman. I'm with the Salina Police Department. Little background information. I graduated from Kansas State University with a degree in sociology and criminal justice. I was hired by the Salina Police Department in 1994 and have been here a little while. I've served in the patrol division, field training officer. The majority of my career I've been a detective, both in the criminal and narcotics section of the department. Upon being promoted to sergeant, I became sergeant of the detectives, and I also did some patrol sergeant. And then once I was promoted to lieutenant, I became in charge of internal affairs and recruiting and hiring. So we're going to discuss section 30-93, just a quick overview since you guys do have it there. I don't want to bore you with everything. So this is the advisory recommendations regarding complaints of excessive force and/or racial or other bias-based policing. So this is what your responsibilities as a board are. The first is when fulfilling your role and responsibility that's described in section 3082, the preliminary administrative determinations by the chief of the police, you're going to see. That's pre-disciplinary status of complaints of excessive force or bias-based policing. So as we go through, any complaints towards police officers shall be reviewed by the board with the purpose of providing your advisory recommendations to the chief of police pursuant to the following standard. And the first is the conduct of any police officers against whom any such complaints are made shall be investigated by the Internal Affairs Office, which is me, and an investigative report prepared. The investigative report shall be regarded as confidential pertaining to an employee or employees of the city of Salina. And that falls under the Kansas Open Records Act. There we go. So then the chief of police, once I complete my report, I pass it on to the chief of police. The chief of police shall consider the investigative report prepared by the Internal Affairs Unit and prepare a written preliminary administrative determination of the status of the complaint. And these are the 5 statuses or findings that he can list. And I'll give you a definition of each one in just a little bit. So the first is unfounded. It can be exonerated, not sustained, sustained, or sustained against policy. So this, once he does that, reads through it and decides what the finding should be, he'll include a statement of findings and conclusions with reference to the evidence upon which those findings and conclusions are based. The preliminary administrative determination of the status of the complaint shall be regarded as a confidential record pertaining to employee or employees of the city. Okay, so did I miss one?
Yep.
Okay, 1, 2. So in section C, what it indicates that the chief of police will then, once we get a complaint, the chief of police will inform the staff liaison that we have a complaint and the anticipated date that it's going to be completed so that we can present it to you. He will then contact the staff liaison, will contact the board and set up when this is going to be reviewed at which meeting, or if necessary, a special board meeting can take place. So in section D, what it indicates that the agenda of the meeting will describe the agenda item without identifying the complainant or the officer, and that's for privacy of all parties involved, and against to whom complaint was made. And then when considering the agenda item, upon the motion, the board shall recess into an executive session to deliberate on the preliminary administrative decision. And it show that, see if it is supported by substantial competent evidence. The staff liaison and the chief of police and any other persons the board chooses to invite to participate as informational or advisory resources may participate in the executive session. The board will be presented with the determination and any other police used in coming to his decision. So you will hear why we have the finding that we have listed. Then during deliberations in the executive session, the board may ask questions. You may request other information relevant to your decision based on the preliminary administrative determination of the status of the complaint and to determine that it is supported by competent evidence. Upon completion of its executive session, the board shall take public action by a majority vote of a quorum of the board without identifying the complainant or the officer, again, to protect their privacy. And here's the options that you can choose. The first one is you make an advisory determination that the preliminary administrative determination of the status of the complaint is supported by the substantial competent evidence. Your second choice is make its advisory determination that the preliminary administration determination of the status of the complaint is not supported by that competent evidence. The third is you may postpone the advisory determination but pending its review for additional information. So you may ask, can we have a little bit more? Can you look at this a little further? So you can do that. You can also make no advisory recommendation or determination. So the way the section also reads that in event of a tie of the board, advisory determination by the board shall be deemed to not be sustained. So Section E states that after you guys make that determination and recommendation, the chief of police and the staff liaison will consult with the city manager and shall determine and document the final administrative determination of the status of the complaint. This termination shall be regarded as confidential also pertaining to an employee of the city, and the board shall be advised of the final disposition of the complaint during your next meeting. The police officer against whom the complaint was made will be informed of the finding and the staff liaison shall create a letter to the complainant and notify them also of what the finding is. And Section F states that if the final administrative determination of the status of the complaint is either sustained or sustained against policy, the chief of police shall take appropriate action to correct any measures or mistakes that were made. And nothing in this section affects the rights of the officer. They will still have due process. They can appeal the action as it falls under the policies and procedures of the city of Salina. So what I'm going to discuss now is how we do complaints at the Salina Police Department. And this is taken from our general order, our policy manual, and it's the primary objectives of a internal investigation. And the first most is the protection of the public. And the reason we do that is the public has the right to expect an efficient, fair, and impartial law enforcement, and that we're doing our jobs. Therefore, any misconduct by our department has to be detected, thoroughly investigated, and adjudicated to ensure these qualities. And that is just for public trust. We have to maintain that. We have to do what's right with the public, for the public. But we're also there to protect the department. The department is often evaluated, and it is judged by our individual officers and their conduct. And it's imperative that the entire organization not be subjected to misconduct by one individual. We have seen recently that one person anywhere in the United States affects all law enforcement by their actions. And we want to make sure that we're operating correctly, and that protects the public, not only the public, but our department, so that we build that trust. Then we also have to protect our employees. Employees must be protected against false allegations of misconduct. Unfortunately, that does happen. This can only be accomplished through consistent, thorough investigative process. When I conduct one of these investigations, I conduct it just like a criminal investigation. I do it the same way I do those. And the last is correction of procedural problems. There is at times that, based on a complaint, we will determine that the officer acted within policy, but it was a faulty policy or something that needs to be changed. And then we can, based on that complaint, change policy and make our policies more effective for us and the community on how we operate. So in General Order 1107.11, our policy states this: all members of the department are charged with the responsibility for courteously and willingly receiving any complaint that may be lodged against the department or any employee. And complaints will be accepted from any source, whether made in person, by mail, or telephone. Anonymous complaints shall be evaluated to determine the extent to which they should be investigated. So every member of our department is obligated to take these complaints and forward them through the right channels so that they can be looked at, investigated, and adjudicated, so that we're doing our job properly. Yes.
I can just add quickly that I've done this for 36 years, and we've came a long ways as far as taking complaints. I mean, when we first started, we did not take anonymous complaints, and now we do. We wouldn't take second or third party complaints, and now we do. So it's not that we're out soliciting complaints, because we're not, but we're just much more susceptible. We take them when we get them, regardless how. It makes it pretty tough. If it is I heard this through the grapevine, that makes it pretty tough to investigate it, but we do take any and all complaints we receive.
So this is how some of the complaints are received, and I'm sure there's other ways that I have missed, but we accept it pretty much anyway. We receive them by telephone, email, or online, in person, either to a supervisor, to an officer, or another city official. By mail, department employees may see something that goes on that they do not think is right. They will report it also, or from another agency, such as KBI or the Kansas Attorney General.
And just to add to that, so, as board members of this board, you may receive complaints. I mean, there may be somebody that wants to bring a complaint directly to you. I mean, it's okay for you to take a complaint and either forward it to me or forward it to Lieutenant over there or to the police chief so that we can investigate it. But there is a likelihood that people will come to you because they may feel more comfortable coming to you to file a complaint. And we want people to be comfortable doing that. I mean, if there's something that's going wrong in our police department, we want to investigate it and get rid of it. So, you know, there probably is an opportunity, and there may be people that come to the podium with complaints. I mean, we don't know how this is all going to kind of go, but we want to be able to be as open to taking complaints and investigating those and doing what we need to do on those, you know, as we get them. So
once a complaint is received at the police department, this is what usually happens. Upon receiving the complaint, it'll be passed on to the Lieutenant Internal Affairs Office and also the Chief of Police. And once there, it'll then be decided who's going to investigate that. Now, depending on the severity of it, it'll be either myself, it could be another supervisor, a captain or such, depending on the severity. If it comes down to an excessive force complaint or a bias-based policing complaint, I will be looking into it. That'll be my responsibility. Is the person suspended or anything like that? That depends on the seriousness if they are put on administrative leave. Just because there's a complaint someone was rude or anything, we're not going to one or anything like that. We will look into it and determine. If it's a very serious one, then there is a chance for administrative leave. Now, the investigation of the complaint. And like I said, in law enforcement, an investigation is an investigation. So I look at it just like any other investigating, it being a criminal investigation or a complaint investigation. I do it the same way. And the most important thing is the impartiality and not making up your mind before you get anything. Because you go in there impartial and with an open mind on an investigation so that you're open to gathering all the information that is available to you. So then you conduct interviews with involved parties if possible. Sometimes people do not want to talk with you. And of course, I can't make people speak with me. If they're willing to talk with me, I get as much information as I can from them. Then I also obtain reports along with the beauty of it. All our officers, especially our patrol officers, have body-worn cameras. I obtain cell phone or phone calls to the police department, 911 calls, radio traffic, and any other video footage that could be available, such as someone's cell phone or anything like that. Nowadays, there's surveillance pretty much everywhere, so that's the nice thing. And then what I do, once I gather all that information, I compile a written report, and based on the information that I have, I come up with what my findings might be. Then I'll pass them on to the Chief of Police, and then he will review my work and look at the evidence that I have gathered. And the options are, he may agree with me, he may say, I want this done, do more further investigation. So here's what the findings mean. These are the options that I have. The first one is unfounded. And this is the investigation conclusively proved that the act complained of did not occur. This finding will also can be used if someone names an individual officer who was not involved in that. That's considered unfounded. And if you have multiple officers, you can have multiple findings. One officer may be unfounded, but then another may not be. So the other one is exonerated. And what that means is that the act which was complained about actually occurred. However, the investigation revealed that the act was justified, lawful, and proper under state law, police policy, and such. Not sustained, the investigation failed to disclose sufficient evidence to clearly prove the allegation that it did happen or did not happen. So we just can't say there's not enough evidence to say either way. Sustained, the investigation disclosed sufficient evidence to clearly prove the allegations made in the complaint. So we found that the complaint was accurate. And sustained against policy, the investigation revealed that there was a faulty policy or procedure. And that way we can adjust our policy, adjust it, how we do things, and operate in a better fashion. So when it comes to racial and bias-based policing, I listed 2 statutes through the Kansas state statutes. 224610C, which was amended in 2011, requires every law enforcement agency to have a racial or bias-based policing policy and contains specific requirements the policy must contain. And some of those include training and other stuff. The Salina Police Department has had a bias-based policing policy since 2003. And during that time, that policy has evolved. We have changed it to make it better and that we operate better. So we have had it for quite a bit. 4610D requires all law enforcement agencies to file an annual report of complaints alleging racial or otherwise bias-based policing with the Attorney General at the end of each fiscal year. Reporting is required even if no complaints are received. The report is due by July 31st. And I put their reporting date is August 1st through July 31st of the following year. And the reason I put that is we report for our accreditation a calendar year. So if we had a bias-based complaint on August 2nd and then one on January 2nd of the following year, August 2nd of 2020 and then January 2nd of this year, for the Attorney General, that would show 2. For our reporting, it would show 2021 if we didn't get any after year. So when you look at some of their records online, which you can look at every year's reporting, numbers may look a little different, and that's why, just because they're a fiscal year, we're a calendar year. So bias-based policing complaints received from the Kansas Attorney General. One of their guidelines is you go online or you can submit a complaint. It's a notarized complaint. They want it to be firsthand from the person that feels there was a bias against them. They don't want third-party complaints because they want to actually be able to get it firsthand from that person. So once they received a complaint, the Attorney General, what their procedure is, they're required by law to send a copy of that complaint to the officer who's complained upon and also the head of the agency that they work for. What they also do is they also send that complaint to the Commission on Peace Officers Standard and Training. You'll hear Kansas CPOST. That is the certifying authority for all law enforcement officers in Kansas. They certify that you are a valid officer. So it's sent to them. They will do an investigation, but what they're looking at is to see if there is any violations of the training that the city is, or the state, or each agency is supposed to provide. So that's what they look at. And then they make a decision. Once they've done their investigation, they have a board also that the investigator presents it to it and see if they confirm his findings. What we do is we get that complaint and we also investigate it and make sure it's not violating anything also, such as policy and procedures, and we handle it that way. So the Attorney General can look into it. They usually pass it on to another agency. So I want to give a quick word about CALEA, which is the Commission on Accreditation for Law Enforcement Agency. CALEA was created in 1979 and is a credentialing authority through joint efforts of law enforcement agencies, major executive associations. These ones right here, the International Chiefs of Police, National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives, National Sheriff's Association, and the Police Executive Research Forum. And what that is this is a national organization. What they do is they accreditate the agencies around the country. Not every agency. You have to apply and you have to go through a very stringent procedure establishing policy and procedures and that they meet national standards. and they review all your policies, all your practices, and decide if you meet their specifications. So, and in Kansas, there's a total of 371 law enforcement agencies. However, only 11 agencies in the state of Kansas are accredited. We've been accredited since 1996. I think we were the second agency in Kansas to be accredited. And so each year, our policies and procedures are reviewed annually for compliance with their standards. And what that also means, they do on-sites with their department. We had one in February or March of last year. They come, they review our policies, they review reports and make sure that we're meeting their standards and are actually doing what we're supposed to be doing. So you have to receive that accreditation and get it renewed, basically. So we've been doing it since 1996. So I tried to make it quick. Is there any questions that I can answer for you?
Okay. If there's no questions, we'll just keep moving here. The next item here is just the Citizens Academy. I think we're going to just have a review of what that means.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Officer Brent Rupert with the Salina Police Department, and I'm going to approach and hand out an item here for you. Just some little information on myself. I'm born and raised here in Salina, graduated from South High, attended Kansas Wesleyan, graduated from Wesleyan, and just like Lieutenant there, I got hired in '94, and the coordinator that represents the Salina Police Department with the Citizens Academy.
If I could preface a few comments before Officer Rupert starts. If in the ordinance, if you look at section 30-87, that's where it specifically talks about the Citizens Academy. I don't know, has anybody here attended the Citizens Academy? Any of the 8 here? Okay. The reason that's in there, that was at my request, but an awful lot of CRBs around the state do require, and they do require that you attend that. We chose not to require it, but the way it's worded is we are highly encouraging you to attend. We realize it takes a lot of your time. I mean, how many weeks is it, sir?
The first one in the fall is our 11-week academy.
So it's 11 weeks of a few hours, 1 day a week. So it takes your time, and I completely understand that. But I think I feel strongly that the end justifies the means as far as giving you just the base knowledge of what police departments do, specifically what your Salina Police Department does on a daily basis. I think as far as the knowledge you gain, I think it's phenomenal. But again, it's not a requirement. You don't have to do it. We're just here to hopefully encourage you to do that if you so desire. And we do have a class coming up shortly. Officer Rupert?
The Citizens Academy is a joint venture with the Salina Police Department and the Saline County Sheriff's Office. We just completed our 26th academy last year in 2020. The mission of the Citizens Academy is to build a better understanding between the citizens and our law enforcement through education and positive interaction with our officers. Chief Nelson, Sheriff Solden, believe that the community and law enforcement partnership is important, providing services and meeting the needs of our citizens and our city, that our citizens are in our city and our county. When the community and law enforcement become cooperation partners, they form a powerful alliance. They're capable of addressing community issues and concerns. The goal of the Salina Police Department and the Saline County Sheriff's Office of the Citizens Academy is to provide members of our community with an inside look at the various units of our departments, the Police Department and the Sheriff Department. It's to help create a better understanding and communication between the citizens and law enforcement through education. And the Citizens Academy offers opportunity for individuals from all segments of our community to experience the firsthand decisions and duties that our officers face every day. As you can see there, I handed out a schedule there. I just met with Ms. Davis provided her the same information. She had to go to another appointment this evening. And when we started this many years ago, we tried different nights, Monday night, Tuesday night, Wednesday night, Thursday night. We stayed away from the Friday, Saturday, and Sundays, weekends with people being out of town. And we found out that the Wednesday nights were our biggest nights, that we've had as many as 35 people in our class, and we've had as little as 10 people in our class. She asked if another night could be determined, which if the board members are willing to do that, we could, if we're all going to be there, we can change it to Tuesday night or another night. We can discuss that. I can bring it back to talk to Lieutenant Kokanowski, who's the coordinator over at the Sheriff Department, and then we can coordinate the dates. But right now, we have it set up on Wednesday evenings. The first class, or the first academy that we have is in the fall, scheduled September 1st, and then to graduation's on November 10th. And then we take a couple months off, and we used to do the spring academy, which is the Advanced Citizens Academy, which the citizens that attend the class during the fall are automatically registered to go into the advanced, and it's only 8 weeks long. We used to do it in February, March, April, and actually March, April, May, and we found out that a lot of people are bored during January and February and first part of March because it's cold out, not much going on. They want to get out and do something. So we moved the academy up, and therefore we left the spring open because we have graduations, we have spring break. We left those open so we didn't interfere with those, and it actually worked out better starting at the end of January and getting it done about the second week of March. And the various classes, as you can see on there, the first night, we have meet out the new training facility, the actual meet at the Sheriff Department on the first night. We get the badges done. We do tours of the departments over there, the tour of the jail. And I do apologize for the city manager, chief of police, sheriff, that you will see and you will hear things that you may not normally see or hear in your daily lives. And I always apologize for that because the people that we deal with, and when you go into the jail, you'll see things in there also. And so we want you to experience, and you do get to go out and do ride-alongs with the officers. We pitch in dispatch one night so you get to see what our dispatchers do. We explain all of our areas of the department with evidence, investigations, drug task force, traffic units, K-9 units. All that information is basically given to you through the academy. The 11-week academy, like I said, right now we're on Wednesday nights, but we can change that. The curriculum provides an opportunity for citizens to know more about our men and women who are protecting your community and why they make the decisions we make. And the Citizens Academy presents an opportunity for the citizens to ask questions, voice their concerns. Like I said, they get a ride along with the officers. And like I said, it also gives you the opportunity to go through the Advanced Citizens Academy, which is a little bit more hands-on stuff that we get you involved with. Anybody have any questions?
If I could just add, as far as the way it's phrased here, it's highly encouraged. I mean, I just say I think you would honestly learn so much as far as what we do. It is a foundation because it's 10 weeks, 40 hours just still. But talk about giving you a base foundation of what our officers go through on a daily basis. I think it would be very beneficial for each of you if you decided to do that. And I've instructed Officer Rupert to also, we've reserved 8 spots. So it doesn't mean all 8 are going to go, but I'm just saying if you wish to go in September 1st, starting September 1st, you'll have a spot. Just let us know.
If you have the applications there, if we could get those back as soon as possible, you could fill them out tonight and hand them to the chief. He'll get them to me. We do our background stuff on them, our investigation part of that. We want to get that all done so then we know how many seats to have. I know Kansas Wesleyan, Bethany College, they also have college students that are just getting their senior year that are looking and going into law enforcement, and we'd like to try to get them involved and get them to see what their job is before they go out and get involved with the job out on the streets. That can be done. We'd like to have those all usually done. If you need to wait a few, as long as we have them completed and turned in by the end of July, that gives us a good time frame. When I'm out on the streets and dealing with citizens, if I come in contact with a citizen that's not happy with me or not happy with the police department, I invite them to this academy. And they actually will show up and come to it. And then afterwards, they've came up and crying and hugging and say, I didn't know, I didn't realize, until you went through and you see all the stuff and the stuff that we pitch you in. In fact, one of the nights that is a really good night on there, you'll see it on there, is our simulator class. It's a use of force judgment simulator. And basically, it's a black room, dark, and it's got screens all around you. And that is the most realistic way that we can put you in situations that we face every day. And you talk to the screen, it talks back at you, and you have to make a decision whether you're going to talk to somebody or if just escalate and use some type of force, or if they come at you, you have to make split-second decisions, and that is the best way. And the people at first, they go through it, well, I don't want to do it, I don't want to do it, and I encourage them, I need you to do this, and they do it, and they come back out, and they want to do it again, they want to do it again, they want to do it again. And then when we go to the advanced class, they actually want to do it more again because they get to see all that stuff, and they get the adrenaline gets going, and they get to actually see, and it's just a very, very, very intense class for 11 weeks and for the 8 weeks in the spring.
Just to add on that, it's called a Virtra 300, Virtra as in virtual, and it's much more, the 300 means 300 degrees of training. It's much more not shooting than shooting. It's not a shoot 'em up thing. It's decisions of when not to shoot, or if you have to use lethal force, which unfortunately sometimes we do. But trust me, it's not where you go in there and just shoot everything. That's not it at all, and that's not what it's designed for. And it's I don't think there's anything better out there right now, and I can tell you this thing costs almost $250,000. I mean, I don't know if that means anything to you, but it's that much technology, and it. In my heart, I believe it's the best there is out there, and we have it in Salina, Kansas, and I'm pretty proud of that.
And echoing the chief, the 90% of that training right there is basically verbal, talking to people, communicating to people, explaining things to folks. And when you're doing that, when you're doing it with the instrument of the training, if it's going right and you're explaining things, it'll go right for you. If you're not explaining things and communicating with people, it's going to go bad. So there's several different scenarios, from suspicious people to traffic stops to domestics to walking into a store to a bank. You don't know what's going to happen. I would really, really enjoy having all of you there. I guarantee that when you're done with it, in fact, after 11 weeks, the people are like, oh, it's over with. We want it to continue. We don't want it to keep going. We take off for a couple months for the holidays, and we finish it up in the end of January. This will be my last academy that I'm going to be participating in, as I'm going to be retiring in December. So Officer Lemon is going to be replacing me, and she's going to be joining us through the academy this fall, and she'll be taking over the coordinator for it. Thank you for your time. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Officer Rupert.
All right, the next item on the agenda is a discussion of chair and vice chair, and I'm not anticipating that we make appointments. If you wanted to do that tonight, we certainly can, but since this is our first time, you just got showered with all the wonderful board information. If you want to go back and think about it for a month, whether you're interested in that, if you want to reach out to me, if you got questions about being the chair or vice chair, you want more information, feel free to reach out, but we will need to make that decision at the next board meeting. Somebody does need to be the chair. So just think about that. If you're interested, reach out and let me know. If anybody has any questions now about that, I'd be happy to, make something up. So. Meeting schedule. So this is something that there's really nothing in the ordinance that talks about when and how we meet. We're kind of anticipating, we don't see, oh, go ahead.
It does say at least quarterly. It's in there, at least quarterly.
Okay, so at least quarterly, but we could meet more, and we kind of anticipate that maybe some of these, that one point about this board, about the function of the board and reviewing those complaint cases, we're not really sure that meeting quarterly will allow us to hit those on the right timeline. So we may need to think about doing special meetings for those. So maybe we have a standing meeting that's quarterly, and then we do a special meeting that would be just with the intent of going over a case as it comes up and as the investigation gets completed. So that's something that we don't have to decide how we're going to do that necessarily right now, but something we need to think about. Do you have any thoughts, I guess, about meeting more than quarterly, or is quarterly, you think, sufficient for now? We can, meet in a couple of months. If you have anything in the meantime, we can go through that. in that time, maybe we'll think of some additional things that we want to bring up. I anticipate we'll probably do things like the Citizen Academy presentation like we had tonight. You know, and there may be something that's actually kind of part of that Citizen Academy training. We might bring that to the board and say, okay, hey, let's go meet at the training facility. Let's show the board what it looks like as a board, and we can do that as a meeting. Haven't worked through all those things just yet, and but something we'll think about. So is quarterly, is that, you think, sufficient right now? We'll meet in about 3 months from now? Or do you think we need to do another meeting before that, or what are your thoughts as a board?
I like to meet before then, so I prefer every other month. to meet.
Okay. Anybody have thoughts on that?
I think that's just fine, yeah. Every other month would be fine with me.
Okay. Okay. So then the next meeting we'd shoot for July timeframe. Now, this room, there's a very limited amount of time that we can get actually in this room. And the reason we chose 4 o'clock is we don't have any additional funding for the police department that comes in through this. So anybody that's an hourly employee, we're paying overtime. So, we kind of, does 4 o'clock work for the board? And maybe we wouldn't necessarily have to do that all the time, but is that a time that works? I know Mr. Grinter had some issues with that, and I don't want to, if that doesn't work, we will make it work at a different time. But for this room, the only 4 o'clock time slot is the first Wednesday of the month. So if that works, we can schedule it. And if we need to change that in the future, that is certainly something we can do. I mean, it's not a big deal to change it if that's what the board wants to do. So does the first Wednesday in July at 4 o'clock in this room, would that be appropriate for the board? Okay, I'm seeing that looks like consensus on that end, so we'll get it scheduled. And for the next board meeting, we'll talk about the comprehensive plan. We'll see if there's anything else that we have. I don't believe we have any complaints in the works right now. So hopefully we don't get any. We don't want complaints. Don't get us wrong. We don't want to be doing the wrong thing. But if we do have one, that certainly we'll maybe talk about the process as we go forward. And this is a learning experience for us all, so it's not something we've ever done. So we're hoping we'll improve it and make it better. And if you've got ideas and suggestions on that front, we can certainly discuss those as we move forward. You have something?
Just a little perspective on the actual racial bias complaints. We went a few years without any. So I guess I'm just saying that don't expect it to, every month we're going to have something, and that's a good thing. We should be happy about that. But generally it's 0 to 2 a year on a racially biased policing complaint, and then use of force 2 or 3-ish a year. When I say use of force, we have use of force every day. But when we have complaints about excessive use of force, it's 2 to 4 a year. So there's not, I just don't want to, if your expectations are we're going to have, and again, that's a good thing. We don't have that many of those complaints. But anyone we have, we will bring forth to you. It's on a separate topic. If you can come up with anything you'd like specifically, anything from the police department about you want a topic or I'm not sure what we're going to call it, but something similar to what Officer Rupert just did, if you just, by all means, let Mr. Wood know the topic, or me, or any of us, we will make that the topic.
Yeah, and you'll have the opportunity, actually the next item on the list here is other business, and that's really your opportunity to bring up any of those things. So at the board meeting, you can do it in between time for now, send me an email, whatever, but that will be your opportunity to say, hey, I noticed something in this policy, or I saw something happen the other day and I wondered about this. Could we get some more information on it? And then we'll kind of try and work that, and then at the next meeting provide some sort of a presentation or whatever. So if the first Wednesday in the month at 4 o'clock in this room works, we will schedule that for July, and then we'll go every other month and kind of just see where that takes us. And then we'll go on to other business. If there's anything anybody on the board right now wants to bring up, or any topics, any discussion, just anything, I'll open the floor up to you. Seeing none, we don't have any executive sessions, so we will. I will go ahead and take a motion to adjourn if somebody wants to make a motion.
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All right. That's your first official motion, and we're done.
Thank you.